This is called the license to kill. Can we really trust anyone with this authority? Can a single man with a trigger in his hand really be entrusted with the authority to take another's life? This is the big question Jimmy was pondering as he lay in bed. It was 2 p.m. Ethics began in 50 minutes. He would have to go discuss some ancient text that no longer had relation to his daily life. He would have to slog through 90 minutes of pontificating. It sucked the life out of him. But it was worse, for the harder question of authority to kill still hung in the air, and the lecturer never broached it. Like it was a dementor that he could only shoo away for a little time. Or Jimmy would get his B plus with well-written diatribes and then really consider the big question. For Jimmy was on track to join the army as an officer. He would be in combat, and as such, to him, ethics went beyond wordplay. He had to know. So he got up and walked to class. It was the same route as every day. Same people hurrying to the same classes, same chatter. Yet he wasn't the same. These questions were haunting him. He got into class, same seat, listened to similar lectures, same pontification, same signal, and same discussions. But he wasn't the same. The thought of having to take a life was haunting him. What right did he have? Would hiding under the banner of the state and its justifications absolve him? He wanted to know, so he did something he considered brave, for smart pontificators scared him. He stayed after class. He got his head together, walked up to the professor, and asked quite simply, "What authority does one man have to take another life?" He continued, "Can it ever be justified? Although we haven't discussed it, are we not treading into the territory of good and evil, of sin?" He said the last couple words carefully. He was at a secular university, and it seemed that word had become taboo. To his surprise, the professor smiled. This puzzled him because the professor never smiled. It was like something had been kindled in him. The professor asked, "Do you have some time right now? This is a long conversation." And thus began a relationship that would span years. But for now, Jimmy walked with the professor back to his office. On the way, they had some idle chatter, but as soon as the door closed, the proverbial switch flipped. "Life, as I see it, is sacred," the professor began, "and as such, any taking of it is in fact what you call sin. It is a crime against humanity. But what to do in cases of self-defense or war or situations in which both parties have raised arms against each other? These questions haunt me." And then the professor asked, "What do you think?" Jimmy was dismayed that he had to ask again what the question was. "What do you think about what I just said?" the professor asked again. By this time, Jimmy had reclaimed his composure. The contrast had struck him. The absurdity of it left him reeling. I don't know," he replied. Another smile from the professor. I'm going to be an officer, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to sleep again after I go to war." The smile on the professor's face lifted down. He was finally in the realm of the real. This was it. Years of thinking and discussing become real. He would have to walk this young man through the actual merit of millennia of ethics. "Okay, come back tomorrow. Same time if you can manage, and we'll get to work." "There's a notion I've been playing around with called the caretaker warrior," began the professor. "The notion is that the earth is the domain of man, and sometimes murder has to be committed." "But it's not that simple," retorted Jimmy. "Relax, I know. The question you're after is, how does the trigger man sleep?" "Yes, I can't do that for you, but I can walk you through what the caretaker warrior would do in theory. You have to make it real." "What if it's not enough?" The professor smiled, a kinder, gentler smile. "Then we will start again with our premises revised." "So I'm to be your case study," Jimmy said, smiling for the first time. He was finally in the realm of the actual. "In a sense," the professor said. "But do you think you're the only one gripped by this conflict?" And for the first time in his life, Jimmy dissented his inner turmoil in what felt like hours but what amounted to seconds. He thought of how many wars had happened, all the triggermen, and odds were his struggle was not his alone, that some others had felt this, and that by walking through it with the professor, they may come to a solution that could better help heal the broken mind of the triggerman. "Where did you go?" asked the professor. "It seemed like you were gone for a few seconds there." "Oh, sorry. What you said hit a chord. I was just pondering the millions, probably, of soldiers who may have felt the same way." "Now we're cooking," said the professor. "We often talk of war and service in our culture, but most of us have never really had to contemplate the burden on the individual soldier. You, my friend, are in a rare class. So let me ask you, when you take your first life, what do you think will happen to you?" "I don't know," replied Jimmy. Not good enough. Take your time. Really dig deep. What do you think your mental state will be? Will you feel success for defending your fellow soldiers? Will you feel agony for removing the loved one of another from this mortal coil? Will you feel that they shot back so it was justified? Take yourself there. Use your imagination. So Jimmy tried. He went there. He pictured a firefight. He really put himself there. And to his horror and piped the light, he felt justified. Jimmy spoke carefully. To be entirely honest, I would feel justified. And to his surprise, this professor, whom he had seen as pontificator, without a smile, with the full candor of one who had trodden the same ground, said, "And that is where your journey begins. Your justification is a privilege, and as such, you have an obligation to only pull the trigger for justice. Your justice, not that of your commanders, yours. Because the man in the mirror is your primary judge. Betray him and he'll punish you, and you can never escape him." That was The License to Kill. Hope you enjoyed.